You are not behind, you're not ahead. You're exactly where you need to be to do what you need to do. Jay Shetty. Welcome back to Blurred Summits. Today on Meaningful Mondays, we are going to be talking about how it is so easy to get caught up in what other people do and think that you're running in the same race that they are. My name's Abdul.
Hi, I'm Hudson.
And we are going to be the host of today's podcast. So the quote that you guys heard a little early on in the podcast was a quote by Jay Shetty. His podcast On Purpose was the number one podcast of 2020, one podcast of the year award on the Streamies. So congratulations to him. But it's a really amazing quote. It talks about the idea that a lot of the times we think we're not on track to where we need to be. And it's a reminder to let us know that we are exactly where we need to be to do exactly what we need to do, even if we can't recognize that in the moment.
Yeah, there's something about just focusing on yourself and kind of like what you're doing. And because everyone else is running their own, as he says, like the races sort of thing, or Abdul said. So everyone's kind of on their own different paths. Some people running a marathon, some a sprint. Like you can't treat everything the same. So you got to do what's sort of best for yourself and not really be too concerned about what others are doing on their personal side of things, right?
Yeah. Something I heard a while back was somebody was talking and they told me, they're like, who told us that we have to run this race, right? Like we're all running this race, but we don't know what it is. And who set the rules, right? Like who put the finish line? For example, in my own life, right? Like in my kind of environment, the expectation is you go through high school, then you go to post-secondary education, then you get a job and you start a family and you do all these things and you hope to retire when you're 65. And this is kind of the race that you run and you hope to be the best in all of those things, right? But who said that we were on this race? Like where are the rules? Where's that rule book that told us, hey, by the way, these are the steps that you need to take in your life? But for some reason, we're always running those steps. We're always running that race.
Well, I think with a lot of that, like your family has a lot to do with what type of race you're running. Like with the kind of like the go to high school, university, that sort of path, obviously who your parents are, your family is, they obviously set those expectations, right? Like they sort of set the expectations for success. So, I mean, half of the choosing to run that race is part of them. But that side makes sense. It's the side when you're focusing on the races or expectations of people that aren't in your family, like your friends, some classmate and things like that. I think you getting caught up in trying to run the races that they want you to run is a super interesting thing, right? Like it's completely understandable to listen to your parents do that side of things, but it's completely, at least most circumstances, illogical to kind of follow and run the race that your friends want you to do, that even classmates want you to do, right? Like,
yeah,
there's something about that where it just seems wrong and you're just focusing on the wrong things and just kind of getting caught up in stuff with a social aspect that doesn't really help you too much in the long run, if that makes any sense at all.
Recognition is probably the key factor in that, right? Because it's like a hamster running on a hamster wheel. It's like trying to run this race, but it doesn't really know where it's going. And the second that it realizes, hey, wait, I'm actually on a hamster wheel right now, that if I just step off, I don't have to be in this race anymore, or this supposed race, right? And just recognizing that the hamster wheel is there, I think that's the biggest part.
I think with a lot of that, it's just people want to keep innately doing new things, challenging themselves. And sometimes they'll overload themselves with all these different challenges and cause a lot of stress and anxiety and things that they just don't need. So if you realize that a lot of these races, like you said, the hamster wheel thing, where you're just on this hamster wheel, just going, you could just step off and relieve yourself of all this stress, all this concern, all these things that you don't really need in your life, right?
Especially if they're not important to you, right?
Well, yeah, that's what it comes down to, really, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're running on a race or you're putting challenges in front of yourself, but you like those challenges, then that's really great. But the truth is, most of the time, those challenges are just like things that we don't want to do, things that we don't want to even be a part of. And it's just this expectation, this race that we're told, hey, by the way, you were born into this race, better start running.
Yeah.
And now you're just caught up in it 20 years later.
Like even some people with like the go to university side of thing, that could be something that they're being forced into doing that they have no intentions and don't want to do, right? Where they could go be an athlete, they could be an entrepreneur, they could do all these things that they don't need to be on this kind of this hamster wheel of just never ending challenges. They could just hop off of it. And I guess those are different challenges, but at least then it's not like you're on a wheel, you're at least moving towards a goal, right? It's something that they're choosing to do.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I always like it when I hear somebody who tells me, hey, I just completely dropped this thing, especially with school, like with university. They tell me, hey, I completely switched programs. And I'm always super happy for them, even if they drop that program in third year or fourth year, because then what they tell me is most of the time, I drop this thing and I'm taking a new program and I love it, right? These past 2 years, I've been suffering and I've been hating my life every single day that I was going to school. I was hating it. But ever since I've switched programs, now I'm having the time of my life. And I think, oh my God, that's just the most amazing thing, right? When you
Yeah.
figure out the things that you actually want to pursue and you put yourself out of that rat race, is a very beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really challenging thing to do, right? Like realizing that you spent 2 years of your life, 3 years, whatever it is, doing something that you hate, something that you don't
Mm,
want to do, and just deciding, you know, I'm just going to drop it and just completely start over, start fresh, and just kind of open everything back up. It's something that not many people are able to do. I'm sure
right.
lots of people just go through university, they'll realize they hate something second, third year, finish it off, and then go work and just be unhappy just because they chose this path in high school, right? Like that's what it really comes down to is I chose to do this in high school. And that's what sets you up where you want to go. Like in university, you're older, you're more mature, you know what you want to do more. So why wouldn't you listen to yourself and just start over with what you know you'd rather
Yeah.
do?
It's insane that we have to decide what we want to pursue for the rest of our lives. Come the time you're 17,
Well,
18
even yeah,
years
grade
old.
11, right? So like
It's
16.
ridiculous. you know, like you're so young. You're so
Yeah.
young. I didn't even know what I wanted to do at that age, and I'm just happy that I got lucky and ended up going into a program that I actually ended up enjoying,
Yeah. Like it's just a
right?
shot in the dark, right? With all that, that's all that is. It's I hope this works. I hope this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
sure it
Something
crosses
something has to
everyone's mind.
change.
It crosses
Something
everyone's
has to
mind probably
change.
all the time, right? Like, is this the right choice? Is this the right thing?
Yeah.
You get a bad mark. Is this worth it? Is this what I really want to do?
Yeah. Yeah. Or you're just not enjoying it. Like half the time you're in this class and you're not enjoying it. And so the questions keep popping up. It's like, is this the thing that I want to pursue? Is that stuff? Is this what I want to spend the rest of my life doing? It's only going to get worse from
Yeah,
here.
yeah. It's gonna
So should
even
I
when you
just
start
call it
working, right?
quits?
It'll just be the same thing. It'll be forever. You'll keep getting those reminders. Hey, is
Yeah.
this really what I wanted to do? But at that point, you
Yeah.
can't really change anything about it, right? Like once you graduate and stuff, it's sort of like, hey, I guess I got to go with it. University is the
Hmm.
time where you can change that and just kind of choose which one you actually want to do instead of worrying too much about having to like rely on yourself for income and things like that.
Yeah. So you spoke about, you think, pressure or yeah, like the social pressures that come on us. And this is the reason why oftentimes we stay in this rat race.
Yep.
What other factors do you think play into remaining in this rat race or just putting up a front for things that you actually don't end up enjoying and running in somebody else's race?
Definitely social expectations. So like sort of like the friends you hang out with could be a part of that. Like your friends
Mm,
sort of like with expect university, or I guess even the other side, the other way, with friends who don't really expect you to go to university, want you to kind of slack off, kind of just
mm,
go out, play hooky, just not worry about school, just have a good time and live life like that. That's get kind of a different kind of rat race, but it's sort of the same thing where you're following kind of the goals and aspirations of others, not because you want to, but because they expect you to.
Yeah.
So the social expectations, that side of things for sure.
Why do you think we do that? Why do you think we follow the norm rather than make our own path?
Because you want to fit in. That's what that comes down to, is you want to feel like you're a part of a collective.
Mm,
Like, especially with that side of things, or I guess it's what really with whoever you hang out with. You want to kind of feel like you fit in. Because I think I probably read something one time where it's like you follow in the path of whoever you're with. Like, you never want to be the smartest person in the room, if that makes sense. So then I guess
right.
you want to be driving yourself forward based on who you're around. So whoever
Kind of
you're
want to
around,
blend in.
yeah, like whoever you're around forces you down a path, even if you don't think so, they definitely do.
Yeah.
So if your friends all want to go to university, be super successful, go work or like top at a CEO or something like that, you're going to eventually start to have sort of that same drive in yourself. Even if you don't
Mm,
intentionally go down that path, it will be there. It'll be there subconsciously. You'll be having this drive. You'll be having this expectation for greater success that if you weren't around them, you wouldn't have, and you wouldn't really think about it without them, really.
I think that's also a bit of a survival instinct that we have within us. They need to blend into the group that we're in.
Yeah.
Because think about it, if you're the bottom of the chain in your group, then you're at risk of death from a survival perspective,
Yeah.
right? Then, right, you're the weakest link. You'll probably run the slowest away from the tiger, you know what I'm saying? And you'll be eaten and you'll be dead. But if you're the strongest in the group, then you're at the greatest risk of being overthrown, right? Then you're always
Yeah.
having to watch your back and you're always having to make sure that everyone around you is staying in line and all this stuff. But if you're just there in the middle where you're not too good, you're not too bad, but you're blending in, then you end up being mediocre, sure, but your chances of survival increase a lot. And I think that instinct remained in us to this day, even when, it doesn't serve us the same purpose as it used to a long time ago.
Well, yeah, I think it definitely on like the bottom end, like you don't want to be the weakest link sort of thing. But on the top end, I'm not sure if that necessarily exists too much anymore. But definitely, yeah, the bottom side of it, you never want to be the weakest link. So you're always driving yourself up towards the middle of that group if you are
Mm.
near the bottom, just to keep yourself secure and safe.
So do you think that sometimes we set ourselves up for failure so let's say our potential is to be at the top of that pack,
Yeah,
right? Do you think that sometimes we self-sabotage, and
it's quite
why?
it's quite possible. Yeah. Sometimes, yeah, you're almost scared of that success. I guess that's what that comes down to, is sometimes you're
Mm,
scared of what comes with that, because there's not many people that have done that before you. So you don't know what to expect with that. So
yeah,
sometimes it'll be out of fear. You'll choose, know what, I'm just gonna not achieve the best of my ability, so I don't have to go into this unknown and kind of fend for myself at that point, right? Because if you kind of overachieve, you're kind of outside of your pack. You're the leader now, I guess, at that point. So then you don't have anything
right.
to follow on. So then it's
Mm,
like I don't know what to do. I don't know how to, I guess, lead. I don't know what to expect. So I'm gonna kind of self-sabotage, maybe somewhat under excel, do a bit worse than I could, just so then I know, get some certainty and some safety with what I know what to expect. It's kind of
right.
a weird thing though, but
It is a weird thing, isn't it? Where a person's potential is a lot higher than it is, and maybe the opportunities even present themselves for you to excel.
yeah,
But because of a certain fear or a risk, like you spoke about, we self sabotage and keep ourselves in a place where we're not too good, we're not too bad, but we're never going to really excel.
sometimes it's also the comfort thing too, right? It just because you know what to expect, it's kind of just comfortable. You don't have to push yourself. It doesn't seem like a lot of work. So you're just kind of just moseying along, just kind of following the tides kind of thing, just so then you can stay in the middle and stay comfortable, right? Some people don't want to
Yeah.
push themselves out of that comfort zone.
Mm,
So they're definitely not pushing themselves to their limit, but obviously they're still not doing bad, but they're nowhere near what they could be doing.
yeah. Yeah. And I think like it's not too bad. It's not a bad thing to be in the middle, right? Like being in the middle can be totally fine. If a person wants to live a comfortable life and they want to, stick to this rat race that they're in, I think that's totally fine. I think the problem arises when we want to get out of it or we want to be better than that. but we don't want to take on any more of the risks, right? We want to climb this hierarchy in our pack, but we don't want to accumulate any of the risk. We don't want to be a leader. We don't want to, be at the front of the group that's leading the group. We want to have the same perks of being this hidden middle guy with having all of the glory or with all of the prestige of being at the top of the pack, right? But you can't get both. You have to give up
Yeah,
one
well,
of
it's
them.
risk comes reward, right? Like you kind of have to pick and
Absolutely.
choose which it is. Like you could easily be the bottom of the pack, but
Mm-hmm.
no risk whatsoever. Kind of middle risk, middle success, and then at the
Right.
very top, high risk, but also comes high success.
Yeah.
So I mean, at the higher you go, the more volatility there is. But if you'll choose that risk is worth it, there's no point in not going after it, right? And trying to succeed with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Let's switch gears a little bit here and let's talk about what role do you think comparison has to do in involving ourselves in this rat race, right? In Jay Shetty's quote, he says, you're not ahead, you're not behind. You're exactly where you need to be. So what's the role of comparison in our determination of our position in that race?
Well, I think a lot, at least like with social media, the big thing is you're seeing people on their race where they are, but you don't know if you're in front of them, behind them. You don't know where you sit in comparison to them on your race, right? So you can see them excelling, making achievements, doing these things, but you don't know where you sit in comparison to them. So you can't really compare your successes, your things you're doing to that person.
Yeah.
Like they could be at the 95th meter of a 100-meter race and you could be at the halfway mark. Seeing what they're doing, you'll get down on yourself, be sad that you're nowhere near what they're doing, but they're basically done their race and you're halfway through it.
Yeah. Or maybe it's like you're comparing yourself to the wrong things when you take social media into account, right?
Yeah.
Because maybe 100 years ago, when we were comparing ourselves and we didn't have social media, we didn't have all these phones and stuff, people would compare themselves to the 30, 40 people around them in their community. You got your neighbors, you have Joe down the street, you have a couple of classmates, a couple of family friends, but that's pretty much it. Your community is confined to this small town.
Yeah.
So when you're comparing yourself, you're only comparing yourself to maybe 100 people, max 100 people. And there are these just 100 people in your circle and you know everything about their lives. You know their first name, last name, their family, everything about them. So it's a very accurate comparison versus social media. Now you're not comparing yourself to 100 people. Now you're comparing yourself to thousands of people, right? And when you're comparing yourself to thousands of people who are only showing the best elements of their lives, your hierarchy changes, your comparison changes altogether. Because now it seems like, from before, maybe I was a middle guy. I could tell that Joe down the street was doing better than me, but Billy is not as good. Now I'm comparing myself. I see LeBron James is on my hierarchy in my list of comparison. I see Bill Gates is there, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, all these crazy, achievers are there. And we're seeing only the good things about their achievement. We're not seeing any of their struggles. So now all of a sudden you're feeling real trash about yourself because you think you're at the bottom of that hierarchy, when in reality, you might not be. You might even be doing real great, but social media never gives you the potential to see that.
Well, yeah, I think for sure the biggest issue with that is the only showing the positive side of things, right? When you're showing the positive, you don't see any of the struggles that these people are going through. So you don't understand how much work they put in to get to where they are, what they've fought through to get to where they are, right?
Or even any personal struggles they're having at the time.
So you think this person's going success. That's all you see. But you don't.
Do you think there's a good role or a good function to comparison? Is there an upside to it?
I mean, there can be. There used to be for sure. But
and what is it?
It can drive you. If you can at least see the person's sheer failure, like in person, you can see kind of what they're fighting through to get to where they are. Good. You know what you need to do to get there, right? Because you can see what they fought through to get to where they are today. But with the social media side, you don't see that struggle. I think through showing that struggle, it then makes it turn into that positive. That is the key, the only thing that's missing, in my opinion. You can see the
Yeah.
struggle to the success. You can understand the hard work they put in, and you could then replicate that yourself to get up there.
Do you
But if you
think
just
there's
see
ever a potential to get that negative side on social media?
on like Instagram, probably not. Maybe like a Facebook or Twitter, sure. It depends on the person though, right? Because lots of people don't want to share their failures. That's what it
Yeah.
mostly comes down to, is you don't want to share them. But if
Yeah.
someone chooses to, then yes, then you can use that, and then you just have to kind of create it and turn it into a norm, which I think would be hard to do. But if you could do that, I think it would make a big difference and make social media a whole lot more helpful. And turn it away from like kind of that toxic environment that it sort of seems to be, where it's only positive, 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 positive. And if you're down and you go looking at all these positives, that all it's going to do is just knock you down even further, right?
Right.
But if you look at it and you're like, oh, they're having a tough time, they did this, 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 and look, they got out of it, that'll drive you further if you're in a hard time. And if you're in a good time, it's like, hey, look at them, they're doing a good job, they got out of what they're doing, right? Like, you can show the negatives. It'll completely flip the switch on social media. Instead of it being a, hey, look at me, look what I'm doing, it's like, hey, look at the challenges that I faced and look how I overcame them.
Yeah. That's real tough, right? That's real tough.
Well, yeah, people innately don't want to show their weaknesses, and
I don't want to show
that's
my
what it is.
weaknesses.
Yeah, no one
You
did.
know, like
No
I'm
one
thinking
does,
like,
right?
would I even post my weaknesses on social media? Like,
Well, like even if you post them retroactively, right? Like you overcome something, it's like, hey, I did this happen, this happened, this happened. This is what
you
the
show the
outcome is.
process
Yeah, like you
with
don't
the
have to do
success.
it in the moment, sure, but after it, I mean, why not, right? Because you know the outcome is positive, so you can say, hey, this is the struggles I went through, this is where I came to. You could potentially do something that way, but I think the issue is, even with half of that, is it just we've been built into this thing where we're scared to show our weaknesses. Maybe it's instinctive from hunting from that side. You don't want to be the bottom of the pack. But if you could kind of change society in a way where then it's okay to show your weakness, show that side of things, I think it'll just help everyone kind of grow and work better on whatever race they're on.
Yeah. Do you think it could have a negative impact? Like, let's say everyone starts showing their weaknesses on social media, that this is like a reinforcer, an enabler to those people who don't want to get up and do stuff, that they say, oh, look, this person's also being a bum, essentially. You know, this
Mm-hmm.
person's also not doing anything, so I don't have to do anything because they're successful and they're showing that they go through struggles as well, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But then you're almost clutching on straws at that point, though, right?
Mm.
Because it's like, hey, look, that person went to McDonald's and they're super successful. So if I go to McDonald's, will that make me super successful?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
right? Like you're just basically drawing lines between things that don't actually relate to each other with that side of things. But I think, yeah, well, with the showing the weakness side again, if they can show what they did to kind of fight through it, then it kind of avoids that.
Yeah.
Say, sure, I had this issue, but I did all this work with this. I did all the work with this. I was waking up early. I was going to the gym. I was grinding like 12 hours a day to get something done. Then it kind of avoids that. But then it also, I guess, then it almost goes back into that negative side of things, or into the old social media where they're just only looking at the positives, right?
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
saying, because then that's almost like the hustle mindset where it's like, if you just hustle, you just grind, then you get to where you need to be, which I guess then is in itself bad as well. But
yeah, it's a tough balance. Like, I think the entire idea of social media, in theory, it's a very beautiful idea.
yeah,
It's a really great idea, but how it's evolved and how it actually functions in society has turned it to be something very destructive, something that is only useful when it's used in a very careful sense.
yeah. Well, I don't even really use social media for the old school side anymore. I just use it for the memes. It's like everything else is so whack,
Yeah.
so bad. I'm like, you know what? Let's just go look at the funny side of things, because who cares what all these other people are doing? Because it is just that positive side, right? It's like, hey, look at me. I'm on this vacation. Hey, look at me. I got this
Yeah.
award. I did this. I did that. Look where I'm going
It's
to
a
school.
bragging contest.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, hey, let's just go look at the funny side of things, not worry about anything else, and just forget what everyone wants to do. Just worry about yourself, and
Yeah.
that's all that really
Yeah.
matters, right?
Yeah. Like, I think that um, if you're doing your own thing and you're proud of the things that you're doing, regardless of how successful they might appear, I think that's the only way to really escape the trap. Because if you, let's say you're pursuing something and you're doing really great at it, but you're not particularly proud of it, or you're always comparing yourself to other people,
Yeah.
social media is going to be extremely destructive.
Hmm.
If you're not doing anything, then social media is also going to be really destructive because you're going to think, okay, I need to get my stuff together. I need to be pushing myself harder.
Yeah.
But if you are pursuing something meaningful and you're proud of the thing that you're pursuing, regardless of the outcomes, I
Yeah.
think that's the only way that you can really overcome that trap, because then you can take yourself back. You can separate yourself from other people's achievements. And
Yeah.
when you separate yourself from other people's achievements, then you can congratulate them without wishing you were in their place.
Well, the hard
You know what
thing
I'm
is you
saying?
you have to know exactly what you're going for that to work though, right? Like you have to have like
Right.
your one goal in mind, your one thing, not looking for anything else and just be on that path, just that dead straight path, kind of locked in sort of thing. Because
Yeah.
if you're not kind of looking for other things, then you instantly fall back into that trap, right?
Yeah.
So it's I don't know, it's a slippery slope with a lot of that stuff at least. So social media always seems like it's kind of risky with almost any of that stuff where any moment you could see something knock you back into that trap without you even really thinking about it firsthand, right? Like you
Mm,
could see something down the line that's like, hey, I'm going to go do something. Where'd that idea come from? That person who did it on Instagram. Like
yeah.
just a subtle thing, right?
It's
Like
like the
sometimes you won't even realize it.
subconscious, like just in the back of your mind, you're thinking, oh, okay, let me just push this way a little bit more.
Yeah, right. Like you won't even really notice it, but it can happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, how do you think it seems like comparison is an inevitable aspect of our lives?
Yeah.
That we compare ourselves regardless of where we are, if we use social media, if we don't use social media, if we live back in the 70s and the 60s, we're still comparing ourselves. 50 years from now, we're still going to be comparing ourselves. It's this innate human habit that we have.
Mhm.
So, how can we leverage that to be something that's a tool for us rather than something that's destructive?
Well, like we said before, be happy with what you're doing, right? Like if you're happy with what you're doing and you kind of know the path that you want to go on, that is how then you can kind of use the comparison thing as leverage as opposed to kind of like a thing that's putting you down.
Mm,
Because if you know where you're going and you're kind of happy with it, you can use the motivation of, oh, that person's being successful on their thing. They're on their grind. I can go do the same thing. Kind of you use it, you look at the other people's race as motivation as opposed to a challenge or
yeah,
another a competitor. That's what it really comes down to is you use other people to motivate you, not to challenge or not to race them. You're not racing that person, right? Like
yeah,
I guess yeah, back to that. So you're looking at that person, it's like, oh wow, look what they're doing. I can do a similar thing, but in my field. So if I kind of take his ideas, take their motivations a bit, and you can use that to push yourself even further with it.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And shifting yourself from this race where you're racing everybody, right? Like if you're racing, let's say that person, who's at the top of your pack, let's say,
Mhm.
but you limit your pack. You say, I'm on a path, and on my path, there have been people who went on it before, inevitably, right? Like you're not the first person on your path. There's
Yeah.
literally billions of humans. There's always somebody who is pursuing almost identical things to you, and they've done it before. And odds are somebody succeeded at it, right? Some people have failed, but some people have succeeded.
Yeah.
And if you compare yourself to that group, I think it can become a lot more of a tool than something that's destructive versus comparing yourself to the world at large,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm not Bill Gates or Elon Musk. I don't even want to be Elon Musk, right? I don't want to
Mhm.
pursue the things he's pursuing. He's doing really amazing things, but it's not my path. It's not my group. And figuring
Yeah.
out who is in your group and then comparing yourself to them and seeing, okay, the people who are ahead of me, what did they do? you know, like you said, what did they do and how can I implement that in my life?
Yeah.
Also taking a look at the people who fell behind. What did they do wrong so I can avoid those mistakes?
Well, yeah, it's like with anything, right? If you look back at your mistakes, like in assignments, midterms, finals, right? Look back at my mistakes. What mistakes did I make? How do I not do those again? You can do that with history, which is,
Mm-hmm.
well, I guess you don't really realize too often, but you can look back at other people because everyone writes books, right? Everyone
Yeah,
writes books, makes YouTube videos, does podcasts, whatever. You can go back, listen, learn from what people's mistakes are, and kind of turn those into strengths and use those to realize how you can just power through things, right? Because soon as you
absolutely.
realize what the weaknesses are or what the shortcomings are of something, you can flip those and just turn them instantly into a positive or a good and just take advantage of it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think it's hard. It's like easier said than done. It
Oh,
is
for sure.
easier
Yeah,
said
this
than
is
done.
something that, yeah, you couldn't get this done in a day. There's no way you could flip this thing from turning it in negative to a positive in a day. It takes time,
Yeah,
right? To realize
yeah.
kind of because you have to change your mindset with a lot of this. Like you completely change how your mind works to turn
I don't
looking
even
at
think you
people.
could ever fully do it. Like I think it's almost you'll slip back a little bit, but then you have to recognize it, pull yourself forward
Yeah, like you
again.
got to be so conscious of things 24/7 for that to be able to
It's
do
a
it
cycle.
consistently. Yeah.
Yeah, it's this big cycle that we're always repeating on, but just the recognition and the effort, I think, is the first step. You know,
Hmm.
you're not,
For
like you said,
sure.
you're not going to change overnight. So,
Yeah.
really, really great stuff. Is there anything else that you want to add on?
I think that's all today. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we stuck too tight to the quote, but I think we did talk about a lot of different things that kind of go through our minds that people can be cognizant of when they're kind of looking at things in their own lives there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for tuning into Blurred Summits. Be sure to join us on Wednesday for Wildcard Wednesday. We are going to be talking about luck. Does it exist? Is it something that we can leverage? How does it work? Be sure to follow us on our social medias. We're on Instagram and TikTok, uploading daily content. You can also listen to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Pandora. And be sure to share this podcast with someone who you think could benefit from the conversation.